The transatlantic slave trade was banned in 1808, but did you know that it did not stop the sale and acquisition of slaves locally within the United States? In fact, the sale of humans continued within U.S. borders until December 6, 1865, when the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. But one of the significant incidents that left a lasting reminder of the horrors of the slave trade era was the illicit shipment of 110 slaves from the Kingdom of Dahomey to the United States in July 1860. The slaves on that ship created what we know today as Africatown, or Africatown, USA. This historic community is located 3 miles north of downtown Mobile, Alabama. In this video, we'll explore the gripping story behind the establishment of Africatown and how they were forcefully shipped to the United States in 1860. The story of Africatown begins with the illegal transatlantic slave trade. In 1860, the Clotilda, the last known slave ship to bring captives from Africa to the United States, arrived in Mobile, Alabama. Despite the international ban on slave trade, the ship, which William Foster commanded, managed to smuggle more than 110 Africans from what is now Benin into America. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, these Africans who had retained their cultural heritage and identity established their own community near Mobile and named it Africatown. Over the years, Africatown faced various challenges, including racial segregation, economic struggles, and limited resources. However, the community has preserved and maintained its distinct cultural heritage, with descendants of the original Africans still living there today. But after the abolishment of the international slave trade, how did William Foster ship 110 West Africans off the coast of Dahomey into the U.S. undetected? The simple answer is that there were many vested interests in the voyage. Many slaveholders and plantation owners were already suffering labor shortages due to the banning of the slave trade. They needed a new supply of labor, so they jointly sponsored the trip to Africa, albeit illegally. The voyage of the Clotilda slave ship was the last known illegal shipment of slaves to the United States. Another interesting thing about this trip is that it all started as a wager. The Clotilda was a 2-masted wooden ship owned by steamboat captain and shipbuilder Timothy Mayer. Mayer wagered another wealthy white man that he could bring a cargo of enslaved Africans aboard the Clotilda into Mobile, Alabama, despite the 1807 Act prohibiting the importation of enslaved people. The men wagered against each other and a group of men from New England. Other people included in this bet were Timothy Mayer's brother, Burns Mayer, John Davy, and others who invested money to hire a crew and captain for one of Mayer's ships, the Clotilda. The Clotilda had been designed for the lumber trade and was commanded by Captain William Foster. While the ship was in port at Waidia in the Kingdom of Dahomey, present-day port of Ouida in Benin, additional work was done on it to accommodate and conceal the shipment of enslaved people against their will to the U.S. Foster successfully bought 125 enslaved people from the then King of Dahomey, located in the present-day Benin Republic in West Africa, and loaded them on board. He paid $100 each for 125 enslaved people, but could only take 110. While he was preparing for departure, he sighted steamers offshore and rapidly departed to evade them. The ship sailed in May 1860 from Dahomey to Mobile, Alabama. Historical records initially attributed the captives aboard the Clotilda to the Tarkbar tribe, but research conducted in the 21st century indicates that they were more likely the Takpa people, a Yorubaoid group originating from the interior of what is now Nigeria. These individuals had been forcefully captured by the King of Dahomey's troops and subsequently sold into slavery at the bustling market of Waidia. In the early days of July 1860, the Clotilda sailed into Mobile Bay, inching closer to the bustling port of Mobile. William Foster, determined to evade detection, cunningly steered the ship under cover of night, skillfully maneuvering it upriver beyond the prying eyes of the authorities. Being an experienced seaman, Foster had devised a smart plan to smuggle all enslaved Africans on board into the heart of Alabama. While it was dark, he swiftly transferred the captive Africans onto a steam river boat, ferrying them ashore. To erase all traces of their illicit voyage, Foster ordered the Clotilda to be set ablaze. Upon arrival, the enslaved Africans were distributed among those who had invested in this audacious venture. They constructed shelters from the bountiful foliage of the Alabama lowlands, adapting their hunting skills to capture the abundant game that roamed their surroundings. As time passed, some of the enslaved individuals were sold and transported to distant corners away from Mobile. Among them was Redoshi, a remarkable woman who was one of the longest living survivors of the Clotilda trip. She was initially purchased by Washington Smith, an influential man who owned a large plantation upcountry. Redoshi was forcefully given the name Sally Smith. Thanks to the tireless efforts of researcher Hannah Durkin, an account of the trip aboard the Clotilda was obtained from Sally. In 2019, Durkin's groundbreaking work uncovered a hidden truth, a revelation that breathed new life into Redoshi's story. It was unveiled that she survived until 1937, making her the last living witness of the Clotilda's enslaved passengers. Federal authorities later pursued legal action against Mayer and his associates, including Foster, for their involvement in the Clotilda's illegal activities. Unfortunately, due to the absence of the ship and crucial evidence, such as its manifest, the 1861 federal court case U.S. versus Burns Mayer, Timothy Mayer, and John Davy did not result in Mayer's conviction. As the post-Civil War era unfolded, the formerly enslaved Africans on Mayer's plantation found themselves emancipated but continued to work the lands in the delta north of Mobile. They united to form a resilient community that is today known as Africa Town. The place is defined by its watery boundaries, surrounded on three sides by a bayou, 3 Mile Creek, and the majestic Mobile River. Among the visionary founders of Africa Town was Cudjoe Kazula Lewis, who was said to be a chief back in Africa. He was the oldest slave aboard the Clotilda. Another chief named Charlie Poteet and their medicine man, the esteemed Jabiz or Jabba, joined him. The story of Africa Town was also shaped by Charles Lewis, known as Oluwele, and his future wife, Maggie, both survivors of the Clotilda's harrowing voyage. Cudjoe Lewis remained in Africa Town until his passing in 1935. Throughout his life, he recounted the capture, the treacherous voyage, and the birth of their community to various writers who sought to capture the essence of their journey. Among those who sought his knowledge were Emma Langdon Roche and Zora Neale Hurston, prominent figures in early 20th century literature. After the Civil War, Africa Town flourished as more people of the same ethnic groups joined the growing settlement, seeking solace and independence from the watchful eyes of their white oppressors. The community developed into two distinct sections. The first, larger area, encompassing approximately 50 acres, and the second, smaller section about 2 miles to the west, known as Lewis Quarters, in honor of Charlie Uluwale Lewis. Through oral histories, family accounts, and the dedication of community schools, the legacy of Africa Town endured. Africa Town's indomitable spirit manifested in the establishment of the African Church, later known as the Old Landmark Church, which became a symbol of resilience and a gathering place for the community. In 1876, the Old Plateau Cemetery, also called as the African Town Graveyard, welcomed its first burials. The early 20th century also witnessed the construction of the stately brick Union Missionary Baptist Church. The first public school in Africa Town was established in 1880, which later became the Mobile County Technical School. Cudjoe Lewis bravely embraced the responsibility of helping the community adapt to their new reality, despite receiving mistreatment from whites. Throughout the years, he served as a spokesperson, giving voice to the struggles, triumphs, and shared history of Africa Town. His wisdom and resilience drew notable visitors, including renowned educator Booker T. Washington, the president of the Tuskegee Institute. Emma Langdon Roche, an American writer, chronicled the journey of the original founders of Africa Town in a book published in 1914. But it was Zora Neale Hurston who captured Cudjoe Lewis's essence in her interview, and later produced a short film depicting his remarkable life. Although her book about Lewis's experiences and Africa Town remained unpublished during her lifetime, it eventually found its way to the world, posthumously published in May 2018 as Barracoon, the story of the last black cargo. Lewis spoke about the civil wars in West Africa, in which members of the losing side were sold into slavery to Africans and Europeans. He narrated how he and others from his village in Takpa were captured by warriors from neighboring Dahomey, taken to Ouide, and imprisoned in a large slave compound. After the Civil War and emancipation, the people asked the U.S. government to repatriate them to Africa, but the request was turned down. The community eventually developed along the spine of Telegraph Road in the early 20th century, becoming known as Plateau for its high ground. The area became part of the city of Mobile. John H. Smith was the mayor of Pritchard, Alabama. He had a deep attachment to Africatown. Unfortunately, Africatown was in a poor shape due to local white authorities treating it as an industrial dumping ground, while being bookended by two of the largest paper mills in the United States. In addition, multiple oil tank farms, a chemical manufacturer, and a cement company also stood in the neighborhood. In addition, the state was planning a new highway through Africatown, threatening to wipe out 14 businesses, almost all of them Black-owned, and several houses built by the Clotilda survivors. However, John Smith was determined to change the situation and develop Africatown. He wanted to turn Africatown into a heritage tourism destination. Smith worked with Howell Heflin, a senator from Alabama, to draft a bill to create an Africatown National Historic Park and District, which would span 800-plus acres in southern Alabama. However, the Reagan administration opposed the bill, stating that Africatown had no site, buildings, or objects of national historical significance. Also, Africatown lacked historical integrity, meaning it did not feel like a historical place. Although Smith's efforts did not produce meaningful results for Africatown before his death, there's been a renewed interest in preserving what is left of Africatown. The discovery of the Clotilda, the burnt slave ship, also sparked interest in developing a museum and a welcome center in Africatown. In early 2018, reporter Ben Raines and the University of Southern Mississippi team surveyed 12-Mile Island in the Mobile River for the remains of the Clotilda slave ship. Shortly after, they were joined by marine sciences expert Monty Graham and the Underwater Works dive shop team. During their exploration, they discovered wreckage believed to be from the Clotilda, which had eluded discovery for over a century. After a thorough verification process, the Alabama Historical Commission confirmed the finding near Africatown on May 22, 2019. The documentary Descendant, released on Netflix in 2022 by Margaret Brown, shed more light on this story and brought international attention to Africatown. Today, Africatown is recognized for its historical importance and is home to several significant sites, such as the Africatown Cemetery, the Africatown Welcome Center, and the Africatown Bridge. The legacy of Africatown is a lasting reminder of the pains of slavery, a testament to the resilience of the African spirit, and a memorial of the fight for Black liberation and civil rights in the United States.